I will, for the next 40 minutes or so, I'll be covering what you see on your screen now, all the modules where new features do apply. Of course, what I'll be talking about is the core modules within GP and not any third-party products. So if you do have any questions about third-party products like Bank Pro or Email Pro, you can ask about them at the end. Just a couple of things to be mindful of. For those technical people watching, GP is known as version 12.17.45, and for those of you who are using WenSoft, they have not provided any, as of today, they have not provided any new build. So if you do wish to upgrade to 2013 R2 and you are using WenSoft, you won't be able to do it as yet if that's the case. The PA products that I was referring to earlier are compatible, they've been tested, so if you do upgrade to that and you are using any of the third-party products, the PA products that are listed, you will be able to use those as normal. Okay, so first thing we're going to look at is the actual interface of GP. When you open certain windows, I've got GP open, so for some of this I'll actually show you a real install of GP rather than just screenshots. So when you open certain windows, you'll see that the ribbon at the top, the bar at the top, is now a little bit more graphic as opposed to what it was before where it just had text. So each window now has this more graphic presentation. For those of you who are not comfortable with this graphic presentation, you can change it back to what it was in your user preferences window. I'll quickly show that to you over here. So you've got this Windows command display now, and you can go back to menu bar, which is just your text that you had as you most likely have it now. For those of you who were attaching documents to either your debtor or creditor records or your transaction records, that was known as OLE document attachment, and now that no longer exists, but it has been replaced with a little bit more straightforward document attachment. So if you do have existing ones, they can be migrated across during the upgrade process. But now, if we look again, we look at GP. You do say a sales transactions, and you'll see you've got an attach button instead of a note using the note, and you can go and attach one or more files of your choice. Sorry, just to get back to my slide. You've also got the ability now to take databases offline. So if you're a system administrator and you don't want people logging on to a certain company, there is now a utility where you can choose which companies you wish to take offline, and then from there, that gives you exclusive access to the database. So if you're doing certain maintenance like check links or year-end close, you can stop other people from logging on at the same time. They'll actually get a warning message that they can't log on until you take the company back you put the company back online. Another system enhancement is something called Smartlist Designer. This came with a service pack within GP 2013, but it's been enhanced a bit more in R2. So if you are creating Smartlist through Smartlist Designer, you have the ability to create a go-to. So if you're not sure what that means, if I go into GP, when you click on a standard smart list, like an out-of-the-box smart list, normally you can double-click on the record and it opens a certain window, and you'll be able to do a similar thing with smart lists that you've created through Smartlist Designer. Now, Smartlist Designer is not to be confused with Smartlist Builder. Smartlist Builder is a completely different module. Smartlist Designer is out of the box in GP, so as soon as you upgrade to 2013 R2, you've already got the designer. You don't need to buy it. You don't need to do any additional install. It's just there. And what it is, you can create, if you know where data is stored within GP, you can create your own custom smart lists from scratch. So you've got a list of all the products here, and you can link them, and you can define the relationship over here, and you can also put predefined filters. And you've also got the ability to do, you can execute the query before you commit it. That way, if you see that the data is wrong, you can still change it rather than having to run it and then find out it's wrong and go and modify it all over again. So that's Smartlist Designer. For those of you who have used a GP component called Professional Services Tools Library, it's important to note that the data modifier and combiner will appear to no longer be available in what we call I call it Pistol, PS, Professional Service Tools Library, I call it Pistol. And it's no longer there. So before anyone panics and goes to Microsoft and says, where is it? It's now part of the GP, the core GP suite. There's no additional install you need to do to use it. And it's a utility. So I'll just quickly show you what it looks like. I'll show you the data one. And you've got customer combiner and modifier. So this is where you can go and change, you can merge two customers together if they've been the same ones have been created twice by accident. Or you can use modifier if you've created a data ID that you've realized is wrong and you want to change it. You can simply go into this window, select what the existing data ID is, nominate what your new data ID is, and process away. And that changes it for you. Oops. Okay, back to my slide. Okay. And this one will be a big relief to a lot of people who do the year-end process, rather than having to worry about 1,000 backups, which I think our standard year-end document has. Although I still recommend you do backups, but if for any reason you're doing your year-end and it crashes, or there's errors, you now have a button that allows you to reverse the year that you've just closed. And it's not just if there's a crash, it's also if you realize that you need to make adjustments in the previous year and you've forgotten to, after you've done the year-end process. So you can undo the year, do your adjustment, and then redo the year-end close. So that button exists again, no additional install or anything after you're in GP 2015, it's already there. I'll show you quickly on the real thing so you don't just, so you know that I didn't just manipulate that screenshot. There it is there. So if I wanted to reverse my 2017 year back to 2016, all I have to do is press that button and it does it automatically. Okay, for those of you who import journals, this one might come in handy. You can copy and paste journals from Excel. So I'm actually going to demonstrate this one for you rather than show you a screenshot. Let me bring GP up again. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open the general journal window. So that essentially looks the same, except now there's an Excel button here. So I've got a journal here. This is a single journal I've got here with about 234 lines. I'm just going to copy that. Go back in here. It's not Control-V. I have to press the paste button. As soon as I paste that, it should hopefully go and put in all the journal numbers, and then they are all 234 of them. And then you can save it and post it as normal. So hopefully that will save people who do a lot of general journals a bit of time. Another feature related to General Ledger is you can roll down your segment descriptions to existing accounts. Previously, it only updated when you created a new segment description, it would only update your existing, your new GL codes. And now you have the option when you create or update a segment description to roll it down to your existing GL codes. It's not going to completely override your description. It's simply going to add a dash at the end of your description and put the new segment description in there. If you're not comfortable with doing that, all you do is press no, and it leaves your GL codes, your GL code descriptions the same. All right, so we'll move on now to receivables. When you previously did a statement, for those of you who do statement runs, you would have had this situation where if you're emailing, if you're trying to do an email run, it would not print, it would not do anything with the documents that did not have an email address. It would simply ignore them. So essentially, you used to have to do two runs, one for your emailing and one for your prints. Now that has been combined for you thanks to a new tick box. And you'll see here I've put the email buttons now here, and there's an email option to say print remaining statements. So those letters that have no email addresses will get automatically printed if you tick that box. So you don't have to ever do it two runs again. You can do it all in one go. Staying on receivables, you can now set your email address based on document type. And what that means, in current, well at least in GP 2013, when you set up email addresses, and this is for people who are not using Email Pro, I need to make a note of that. This is using standard GP functionality. You would normally define all your email addresses here, and there was no clear way to distinguish which documents this is for. So I've got two email addresses here. I've got myself as an example. I've got one of my colleagues, Lex, as another example. And there might be a situation where I want to email myself the invoices, but I want to email Lex statements. So you can now do a split. So if I click on email, oops, I've got Email Pro running, so I need to disable that. Just bear with me. If I go back in here, so I can enable email address based on document type. So here's all my documents. So I might say for my invoice, I want to send that to myself only. And then for statements, I can go and say I want to send that to Lex. So the semicolon, when you put multiple addresses, automatically does the distinction between each of your email addresses. You don't have to do anything manual in there. It does that automatically. So as long as you've got a semicolon between each email address, you can do a distinction such as this. Now moving on to payables, if you do payment runs by check, you can choose the default method in which the checks are sorted. Previously you had to change the sort at the time you're doing a payment run, regardless of whether so for instance, if you're always sorting them by name, even if you always change it to name, there was never a way to default it to always be by name. It was always going to be, it's always defaulting to payment number. But now in the payables setup window, you can choose the default sort order. And you can still change it at the transaction level if you wish. And this will look familiar as well when you're doing your emailing. If you're emailing purchase orders and remittances, you can also split by document type. So again, in the payables window, we go into the creditor maintenance. So in this window, see, I've got these two email addresses, Melanie and Deb, also consultants here at PA. And so, for instance, I want to email Melanie purchase orders and I want to email Deb remittances. So I can go into my email and I can go and do a split. So I can say I want to send Melanie the purchase order, and then I go into remittance and say I want to email Deb the remittances. So it knows which email to pick up automatically. For those of you who do bank rec, there's an additional report that can now be reprinted. When you normally do a bank rec, there are 4 reports that print. There is the reconciliation journal, the adjustments journal, and the cleared transactions journal. There was a 4th one, an outstanding one. That was the only one you were not able to reprint. It has now been added as a report for you in your reports, your bank posting journals drop-down, and you can go and reprint the outstanding transactions report. Moving on to fixed assets. Previously, asset IDs had to be manually assigned. So you had to decide what the next number was. That was always problematic because you would have to do a lookup to find out what your last number was, and it wasn't really validated. You could accidentally put an extra 0 or forget a 0, which could distort how your assets are sorted when you're doing inquiries. And now you can default the asset ID based on your asset class. So if I then may demonstrate, I'm going for my financial page, and I'll go to my setup. We've got class over here. So if I select, for instance, auto, there is now this tick box, so you don't have to do it. If you still want to do it manually, you can. But I've chosen to default the asset ID from class, and I've called it AUT. So if I go to my fixed assets general, the class ID is now being moved to the top just to make it a little bit easier. So when I select auto, you'll see now the asset ID has defaulted. So that I can continue the rest of the process as normal. So after you select the class ID, you can still change the asset ID if you don't like the default number. There's nothing stopping you from doing that. It's just to make it a little bit easier in terms of populating the next number. For those of you who are using analytical accounting, especially if you're installing it for the first time, there is now something called a pre-activation check. So before you can even activate AA, there is a button you can click on, and it will make sure there's no orphan records or duplicate records that may already exist. It's not compulsory, but certainly strongly recommended. If you assign analytical accounting codes to any of your control accounts, such as your payables control, your receivables control, when you make a payment, it will actually default whatever transaction dimension you assigned at the time of the invoice. So that way you don't have to assign the same, or you don't have to search what the original AA code was used at the invoice level. It will just pick it up from there and default it when you make your payment. If you're not using, if you haven't assigned AA codes to your control accounts, then of course this is not relevant. Right, so we're going to move away from core financials now. We'll move on to sales order processing, and there is a new feature here called the suggestion analysis. And the suggestion analysis itself is not entirely new, but it provides, now the suggestion window provides a little bit more information. So instead of just giving you the suggested item number, it even suggests a quantity and shows you the percent, how it's been matched. So well, I can try and demonstrate it if anyone's curious. I'll see if I've got it working on my side. So I'll go into sales transaction. And I'll do a new invoice. See if this works. Two. And where is the suggestion? Here we go. I can suggest items. Okay, so it's now gone and made the suggestion for me. Okay, so if I've set up my item to allow suggestions, which I'll talk about when we get to inventory, it will come up here, and you can go and add that as well. So that's very useful if you'd like to sell. If you've got, say, a promotion running in your sales transaction, when you're doing sales transactions, that you sell one component, the client gets another component with it. Maybe whether it's free or not is up to you. but that's what the suggestion analysis is used for. In relation to that, you may have noticed in that previous screenshot there was a little script at the bottom that I put in myself. And the script is simply some text, so that when you open the suggestion, it allows you to, it shows you a script. So this is an internal note. So I've written just as an example, please ask customer about demonstrating ClickView, which is one of our dashboard reporting tools that we support. And that's an internal note for the person entering the sales transaction. So if they want to, if they're doing it, and they get that script, they know they can talk to the client afterwards. Staying on sales order processing, if you are doing a mass print and you're sending email documents by email, if you've ticked send documents by email, once again, any documents that don't have an email address attached will be printed for you automatically. So you no longer have to tick both boxes. You can just tick send document and email. Even in the screenshot I've got both. You only need the one, and it will print the other ones automatically for you. Excuse me. Moving on to purchase order processing. If you've done any purchase order prepayments, you will now, in the payables payment inquiry, you will now be able to see the link to the purchase order if you've made a prepayment against it. If not, the PO number field will not be seen, which is abnormal. And from there, you'll see the PO number. You can drill into the purchase order itself to see what the number is. You can see not just the number, but the details of the purchase order. In relation to purchase order processing, you have now got the ability to enter requisitions directly into GP. So previously we've been, and we continue to support Workplace, and we're certainly not suggesting if you're using Workplace to change. If Workplace works, keep it. This is for anyone who's interested in using requisitions in the future. Rather than going down the Workplace path, you can use Workplace requisitions and set up a workflow within GP itself. So workflow meaning the approval process. So someone enters a requisition, another user has to approve it before it gets converted to a purchase order to be printed. And of course, if you are using requisitions, seeing as you are using requisitions, you've also got the requisition inquiry window as well. So you can see the full trace of requisition to purchase order to receipt if you want. Similar to sales, to SOP, if you are doing a mass print of purchase orders, you need only tick to send document and email, and it will print the purchase orders that don't have an email address for you. Okay, for those of you who use inventory, previously when you create a new item, you would need to manually go into the item quantities maintenance and assign it to each site where you want to use it. Either that, or when you're doing a sales transaction or a POP transaction, you would be forced to assign it to the site you're using ad hoc every time you use the site for the first time. There's now a new window that saves a bit of misery for you, which is the ability to assign an item to multiple sites at once rather than one by one. So rather than just show you a screenshot, I can demonstrate this one for you. If I go cards, inventory, just select a random item, go to quantity sites, okay, you've now got site item assignments, and you can go in and do a mark all to assign which sites you want to. So the tick box is there, and then all you have to do is press OK, and it's done. So that's your mass assign. So I think that's certainly better than having to look up each site one by one. So that takes me to the end of the distribution side of BP.